Hello, welcome to Cracking the Cryptic. Normally on Saturdays or Sundays I tend to look at the deadly rated Killer Sudoku that appears in the Times every week. It's a very good standard of Killer Sudoku. But one of our followers on Twitter has asked us to take a look at this puzzle. Apparently this is not rated deadly, it's rated tough. I don't know where this puzzle appeared, but we've been asked to have a look at it on the basis that it was very intractable. Now I've just typed it into my software, and as I'm doing it I'm sort of, I'm looking at the boxes, and I can certainly see why this puzzle has proved problematic. The geometry is very unusual, and if we actually look at how many cells in the puzzle are actually given, how many cells can you quickly eliminate down to or write in, I'm not seeing much at all. So I suspect this is going to be a tricky solve, but without further ado, let's have a look. Okay, we have a 15 cage here in 5, so that's where I would probably begin. It's not, oh goodness me. So we can write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 into all of the cells in this box, because they have to add to 15, and 15 can only be made if you add up the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So now I'd look at this bottom 3x3 box. On the back of that you can see I have a 19 and a 14 cage entirely contained within this 3x3 box. 19 plus 14 is 33. So I know that this cell and this cell have to add up to 12, because I know this box will in total contain numbers that add up to 45, because it will contain all of the numbers from 1 to 9 exactly once each. If you add up the numbers 1 to 9 you get 45. So I know this cell and this cell have to add to 12. That means I can eliminate a couple of the numbers. 1 and 2 are impossible therefore, and this has to be 7, 8 and 9 in some order. That's going to lock the 1 and the 2 into this 3x3 cage, but I doubt that's going to be terribly helpful. Let's keep thinking. Okay, well, I'm not seeing anything terribly easy from here. I mean, one thing I'd probably check is that we can isolate the value of this square and this square by looking carefully at the first 2 rows of the grid. We know these 2 rows, once we have a correct solution, will sum to 90, because they'll contain the numbers 1 to 9 exactly twice each. So 45 from this row, 45 from this row. But if we look at all the cages that are sort of contained in rows 1 and 2, you can see this square and this square stick out. So let's add all this up. So 15 plus 8 is 23, plus 32 is 55, and 9 is 64. That's 81. That's 100. So I know this square and this square have to sum up to 10. Now, it's not a terribly helpful total. I guess I can say that with an 8 square like this, there are only relatively few numbers that an 8 in 3 can contain. It can contain the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Well, I can rule out the 5 now, because if this was a 5, that would force this to be a 5 too. So I think that means we have that configuration, so not terribly helpful. Okay, but there is something elegant we can do here. We can actually think we can get the value of this cell. Just write it in. Now that's the challenge. So again, I really recommend pausing these videos. It's much better if you try and work out why I think we can write in the value of this cell. Now the reason is that we need to place a 1 somewhere in row 1. Let's ask ourselves where we can do that. Well, we can't place it here, because that would mean these 2 cells have to add to 18. That's impossible. It can't have 2 9s. We could have it here. Now 1 can't actually appear in this 32 cage, because if a 1 was in one of these positions, the other 4 cells would have to add to 31, and that's impossible. It's very, very useful to know that the maximum number that 4 cells can add up to in a Killer Sudoku is 30, and that's if they're 6, 7, 8, and 9. So in fact, none of these cells can contain a 1, so we're left with these 2 cells as well as this one. Can either of these cells contain a 1? Well, no, because one thing that, again, is useful to remember is that an 8 cage has 2 configurations, 1, 2, and 5, or 1, 3, and 4. Now you'll note that in either of those configurations, you always have a 1. So we know there's a 1 somewhere in this 8 cage. Therefore, there is not a 1 in this 15 cage. Therefore, the only place a 1 can go is here. I wonder if that is the sort of the little bit of logic that really makes this puzzle easier if you spot it. I can remove the 7 and the 9 now from this 19 cage. Now remembering these 2 cells have to sum to 10, that means I can remove the 3 and the 1 from this position. There's going to be a 1 in one of these 2 positions, don't know which one yet. Okay, now that must be useful. Yes, it is useful. Let's have a look up here now. So we have a 17 cage and a 19 cage entirely contained within this 3x3 box. 17 plus 19 is 36. So I know this cell, and this cell must sum to 9, because I know the cage overall will equal 45, just as we've done the same logic down here. Now, I have to make this I've got to make these 3 cells add up to 9 without using a 1. And a quick bit of mental arithmetic will tell you if you add 2, 3, and 4 together, you get 9. So we know that these cells must be 2, 3, and 4, because it's the only way that arithmetic will work. And I'm seeing a nice triple now across row 3. We've got 2, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. Which I think is going to be extremely helpful, because now if we think about this 8, it can either be 1, 3, 4 or 1, 2, 5. Well, if it was 1, 3, 4, let me just show you why this won't work. If I put 1, 3, and 4 in here, let's have a look now. We've got far too many cells in row 3 containing the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. We have in fact 5 cells for only 4 unknowns. So that's absolutely impossible. In fact, this has to be 1 and 5. And now we can write this 2 in here. And we can write 5, 6, and 8 up here, like that. Oh, and this is very nice. Now, because we have a 9 cage in row 2 here, but we can't use a 1 or a 5 in, so again, that has to be 2, 3, 4. And that gives us the same configuration with this 8 here, so this has to be 1, 5 as well. So this is a very strange puzzle, and I say that because I don't know this for a fact, but just looking at the geometry as I did at the start and trying to spot anything clever, I doubt, unless you see the possibility of this 1 early on, I can well imagine it just becomes impossible, this puzzle. But once you see it, it's actually, I think, going to fall apart quite quickly. So this has got to be a 2 now. Now if we look at this 28 cage in 4 cells, obviously if this was a 3, these 3 cells would have to add to 25. Again, that's impossible. 7, 8, and 9, which are the highest numbers we could use, add to 24. So this has to be a 4, this has to be a 3. And there's a variety of things we can, 3, 4, 4, we can conclude from that. In particular, these 3 cells do have to be 7, 8, and 9 in some order. Now if we look down this column, we can remove 8 as a possibility, because we already have an 8 in this 19 cage, so this is 7 and a 9, therefore this has to be an 8. we're starting to make good progress now. This 18 cage already has a 3 in it. These two cells therefore have to add to 15 without using an 8, so they have to be 6 and 9. That means this is a 7 and this is a 9. Okay. We can remove the 5 here and note that this has to be 6 and 8 in some order. And this square already has a 9 in it, so we can go a bit further with, oops, I could if it changed over, that's got to be 6, that's got to be 9. It's got to be 1, 4, 5, can't be 2 and 3 because we already have the 2 and the 3 up here. Right, where's the next? Oh, well, we have a 2 now in this square, so these 4 cells have to be 6, 7, 8, and 9 in some order again. We don't know the order, but we know that they will be those numbers. That means we can remove the 6 and the 8 from here, which means this has to be a 5, which means this is 3 and 4. We have to have a 3 and a 4 in the row somewhere. 3 and 4 add to 7, therefore this has to be an 8. This is a 6, and this is an 8. Now, 15 plus 8 is 23, so we know these 3 squares have to add to 22, because again this box has to add to 45 in total. Every box has to add to, so that's 6, 7, and 9. Some order. I don't think we can see which order yet, which is a little bit irritating. 6, 7, and 9 as well. Just stare at this for a second. This 5 and this 5, or we can move this 7. Let's see, so this was, so in fact, yeah, okay. Look at the possibilities for this 14 cage now, given that the 2 of the cells have to contain the numbers 1, 2, 3 and 4. Obviously the best we can do there is 3 and 4, that would add up to 7, that would make this a 7. If we use 2 and 4 to make 6, that doesn't work because we already have an 8 here. So the other possibility would be 1 and 4, which would make this a 9. But after that we've run out of room, so this has to be 7 or 9, and this is a 7 or 9. So we've now actually got 5 numbers in effect secured in this column, because the 7 and 9 pairing you can see there. So we've still got to place a 6. We know that there will be a 6 in one of these 2 positions, and the other number will be 2, 3 or 5 in some order. Now does that help us? Well, it might do. Now let's look at these 2 boxes together. We can see, if we look carefully, that this cell and this cell are the only 2 cells that stick into this box that we haven't already identified. So we've got 6, 7, 8, 9, which we know adds up to 30 here. So that's 30 plus 15, that's 45, plus 14 is 59, plus 19 is 78. So we know that these 2 cells here must add up to 12, because we know that together these 2 boxes will add up to 90. Now can we make 12 anyway? Yeah, only with 8 and 4, I think. So this has to be, I think if my arithmetic was correct, this would have to be a 4 and this would have to be an 8. That means this has to be a 4, because we know that there can't now be a 4 in this 15 cage. Let's remove all of those 4s there. But that means we can't have a 4 in this 14 cage. So the best we're going to do is going to be 2 and 3 to make 9. So therefore, when I say 2 and 3, it makes 5 obviously, but the 14 to work is going to have, that's going to have to be a 9, like that. We can now remove the 2, 3 combinations there. Remove 5 combinations from there. And there we go. I think now this is forced to be a 1, this is forced to be a 5. And I think the puzzle is likely to be solved now in terms of, you know, difficult steps. Maybe talking too soon, so I'll just carry on for a little bit longer. But I'm not proposing to do every single, you know, boring bit. There we go. Well, I never like doing this because it's so long-winded. But one thing we could look at doing is working out the value of this cell, which we know already, and this cell. And we can do that by the most horrible bit of arithmetic, which is if we imagine a line going across the grid where the cursor's moving here. So if you like, isolating the bottom 4 rows of the grid. Now, we know that these bottom 4 rows of the grid will add up to 180, because they'll contain the numbers from 1 to 9 4 times each. But we can also see that there are a lot of cages entirely contained within these bottom 4 rows. And in fact, if we add up all those cages entirely contained within the bottom 4 rows, we're just going to be left with this 15 cage and this 23 cage that sort of stick out past our imaginary line. Now that will allow us to isolate the value of this cell, and this cell. And given that we know this cell already, I suspect this will be, well, it'll certainly very much narrow down this and may even give us the value. So let's do this. So we have 15 plus 14 is 29, plus 19 is 48, 48 plus 40 is 11 plus 29, that's 88. Plus this 15 is 103, plus this 18 is 121, 135, 150, 166, 169, 189. So these 3 cells, in order to ensure that the bottom 4 rows add up to the right number, have to add up to 9, where one of them is a 5, so these 2 cells actually have to add up to 4. So this can't be a 2, because if this was a 2, this would also be a 2. Which I think will be very helpful. So this has to be a 3, this has to be a 1, this has to be a 2. Oh, and simple Sudoku rules now, you see we have a 2 and a 2 here, so there's got to be a 2 in one of these 2 positions, and we already have a 2 here, so that has to be a 2. And now there is a 2 in one of these positions. Okay. And again, we're starting to make a little more progress again. We can now do the usual trick on the central row. So if we look at the numbers we already have, we have a 1, a 2, a 3, a 5 and a 9. Well, those numbers add up to 20. And we have a 17 cage, so that gives us 37. So this number here must be an 8 in order to ensure the row adds up to the right number. It's got to be an 8 here or here. This has to be 4, 6 and 7. That means simple Sudoku rules, this is forced to be a 1. place 3, 5 and 8 in these positions here. That allows us to isolate some values for this cell, because we know these two have to add up to 11, so 3, 8 and 6 are the only possibilities left for that cell there. Oh, now, well, can this be an 8? Now, if this was an 8, these two would have to add up to 6, which is impossible, because this is a 3, this would have to be a 3 as well, that's not possible. If this was a 5, this would have to be a 1, that's not possible. So this cell cannot be an 8. We can write that in. This has to be an 8 here. We have the 8 from that position. Now, is that going to be helpful? These two cells are quite limited now. Right, where can we... I'm now wondering, I can see we have a 9 here. I'm just scanning across. Where can we place a 9 in this box? We can't place it in either of these two positions. It can't go here. It can't go here. It can't go here, because then these two cells would have to add up to 5, and if this is a 3, this would have to be a 2, so that's impossible. So this could be a 9. Now, 13, 6, 7 would be possible. Can't see why that wouldn't work. We should just write in, so we've got 4, 6, sorry, 6, 7, 9 into these positions here. So in fact, this, can this be a 9? This is a 9. No, it can't be. That's not going to work, because we're going to get... Oh yes, no, it is going to work. How annoying. Oh no, hang on. Oh, we can do this a different way. Look, we can't place a 9 in this 11 box. And we have to place a 9 in row 8 somewhere. So this is the only position a 9 can go. I should have been quicker to that. Sorry about that. That was a bit silly of me. So now, this is resolved now. That has to be a 2 and this has to be a 4. That gives us a 3 and a 4 up here. This has to now be a 5. This has to be a 4. This has to be a 3. 18, therefore this has to be a 6, this has to be a 7, and I think we're there. So I'm going to stop there. I think this was actually a really interesting puzzle. Definitely should have been rated higher than tough, because I think that first step was it's one of those binary steps. I wasn't seeing any other easy way into the puzzle. So if you didn't spot that, I think you could have stared at this all day and you wouldn't solve it. But luckily enough we did, and so we were able to make progress. And so I hope this was useful, and we'll see you again next time.